welcome back, and I will apologize right up the front. Since I left here last week, I woke up the next morning with an absolutely horrible cold, and I'm starting to feel human again, but I do every once in a while choke and start coughing, and so if I walk out, I'll be right back. I do have water and all that, so please bear with me. With that, I will do what I can. Also coming around are some cards that have numbers on them. Take one card, everybody has a card with a number on it, and you'll notice the numbers are different colors, and that's so that when I get ready to group you, because even as principals, and I know teachers were the same way, they still tend to migrate just like students do with people that they are most comfortable with and the people that they know the best. And so today, since we want to get some really good, rich conversations going again, like we did last week, we're going to group you according to your cards. When I used these in the classroom, I actually had some Dr. Seuss cards that were one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, and I finally wore them out, and I can't find them again, so I made my own. But you know how when you give kids a card to group them, the first thing they do is look around, what card do you have? What card do you have? And they see who they can, well, they don't know whether you're going to group them by number or color. And by having them like this, you can group them the first time in class by the color, and then if you want to regroup them in the same class period, okay, now find your number. And so you've got two different groups using the same card, and they don't switch because they don't know what you're going to do. So that's just kind of a little trick that I used that worked really well for me, and feel free to steal that. If you want cards like this, email me, I saved it. So I can share that with you, but it was just always a fun, different thing to do. You know how kids like gimmicks, so that's what I did. So I'm hoping that this works better today, since we don't have any dead spots like we did last week. Today we're going to start talking about the how we're going to do the STEM. Last week we talked more about why we do the STEM. So today we're going to focus on the how. And I'm going to show you a video. On each table, you have some sticky notes. Feel free to use those or scratch paper or whatever. As I go through this, I'm going to stop it, I think in 4 different places along the way. As we watch it, if there's something that comes to mind, a question that you have, or an idea that pops into your head while you're watching it, jot it down, because I know how I am. If I don't jot it down when it comes into my mind, it's gone, and I might not think of it for 2 more days. So please feel free to jot that down as we go through the video. And I did play around with the audio. If it's too loud in the back, tell me, and I will turn it down. So let's see. Also, I just want to tell you too that the first time I watched this video, I thought it was odd. I didn't realize it was a narrator that was actually like reading a story that was illustrated. And I'm going, gosh, the girl in this has a really deep voice. And then it dawned on me it was the same person faking different voices. So it is a narrator. And that was distracting to me the first time I watched it. So just so that you know.
It was a warm spring morning down at the Main Street schoolyard. Excitement was in the air. Hey, check this out, said Charlie. The school's Going Places contest has been announced. Come on, let's go get our kits. And so the kits were handed out. Everyone identical, everyone with a set of precise instructions. Each student set off to work. Charlie knew how to follow directions. He made great progress and was quite proud of his work. Meanwhile, Maya was taking her time. She watched the world around her, noticing other ways things go places. The next morning, Charlie was finished and carefully inspected his work. But a noise interrupted his thoughts. Wow, said Charlie. What is that? You didn't follow the directions, did you? I started to, said Maya, but I wanted to try something different. Maya, what does that have to do with a go-kart? Asked Charlie. Who said it had to be a go-kart?
Okay, so we've seen the first part of the video. Any thoughts or ideas as you watched through that? Something that hit a nerve maybe?
The picture on the box shows what it's supposed to look like according to the kit. The little girl didn't have that, so she used her imagination.
Ooh. I noticed that everything was identical too at the beginning. Okay. Any other thoughts or ideas or questions that you have?
Suddenly, my project doesn't look very exciting. Oh, but you're a great builder, said Maya. Hey, maybe we should work together. And so they did. First, they compared notes. Charlie was good at details. Maya, good at dreaming up ideas. Each had a different approach to getting things done. Then they got to work. Side by side, they helped one another to build something new, something inspired, something spectacular. The next morning, everyone gathered for the final challenge, the big race. Each student stood alongside his or her finished project, each cart a perfect replica. Well, almost perfect. Ready? Asked Charlie. Ready as I'll ever be, said Maya. Some of the other students weren't so convinced. Ha! You may think you're going places, but you're just going to lose.
Students, start your engine.
So, we now have our finished project, and we're getting ready for the big race. Now what? What do you think's going to happen? Can I jot some ideas down? If you don't want to say it out loud.
Whatever they crafted as is, whoever wins the race, I guess, depends on how well they work on the engine, or who gets the fastest, or who's the slowest, the one kids that fell apart, so.
Yeah. And it's just like real life. Sometimes they do well and sometimes not so much. Yeah. So let's see what happens.
On your mark. Get set.
Charlie shouted. Maya, they're all ahead of us. What are we waiting for? No worries, said Maya. Flaps down, throttle up. Whoa, did you see that? And we have our winner. Charlie and Maya were ecstatic. We did it. We finished, said Charlie. Finished? I don't think so. We've only just begun. Right. Flaps down, throttle up. And off they went. They really were going places. They were going above and beyond.
That's actually the end of it. The rest of it's just watching them fly off and then the music. What do you think? You're all smiling. That's a good thing, right? Why are you smiling?
Collaboration and innovation won out.
Yes, collaboration and innovation won. Maya did not follow directions. Now, when I was in school, and when a lot of you were in school, what happened when you didn't follow directions? You got in trouble, you were embarrassed, you didn't get a very good grade. Now, what do we actually value? Innovative thinking, thinking outside the box. I remember one time talking about, I was that person. I stayed in my box. I did exactly what the teachers told me. And I could do really well. But then when I had to do something creative, I didn't have the, I could think about it, but I guess I didn't have the courage to do it. So it took me a long time to be able to think outside the box. But we're teaching our kids now to think outside the box, and we value that. Why do you think we value that so much now?
Because businesses now value that. Back in the days, we were taught in a society where you were in manufacturing and most of those jobs did not require innovation. So thus the times have changed and the jobs have gone to problem solving and innovation and being able to think as opposed to following the rules and following the directions. In factories, you just did what you were supposed to do and you did it a certain way and you did it over and over again.
Have you seen my presentation? She's not a plant, trust me. But yes, that's absolutely right. Back in the day, jobs were different, and the demands of the jobs were different. And so now, we need those people who can think outside the box and think creatively. So people like Maya would be more valued than the ones who followed the step-by-step directions. You know, I taught science for a long time. And back when I first started teaching science, we would give the students a cookbook lab. Here are the directions, follow the steps, step by step, and if you do it exactly right, you're going to get the right answers. And if you don't follow it step by step exactly, your experiment's going to flop. Well, that's not the way it is now. Now you hand them a whole bunch of stuff and you say, here's what you need to figure out. You figure out how to do it. Well, you can't do that to students who haven't learned how to think. And so now, the emphasis is no longer on following the step-by-step directions, but instead of thinking creatively. All right, so why STEM in the classroom? I'm going to give you a handout, and it's got 5 blanks, and what you're going to do, up at the top, you're going to, I'm just going to pass these out, just start passing them around the room. In the first one, pass those down. In the first set of boxes, you're going to write, what expectations do you have for the teachers? Now, the teachers are going to get something similar to this when they do their professional development. The second question, do the teachers know what these expectations are? Now, I understand that that's a yes or no answer, so you don't get off that easily. How will you know, or how do you know that they know those expectations? I've got plenty. Did everybody get one now? Right here. Thank you. In the third one, what expectations do you have for the students? And number 4, again, do the students know those expectations? And yes or no, how will you know, or how do you know if they do? And then in the bottom, your expectations. Record your final thoughts on how you're going to communicate those expectations to the students and the teachers. So I'm just going to give you a few minutes to do that. So today we're going to work on these 3 essential questions. We're going to talk a little bit about what STEM leadership is and what it looks like. You probably already have in mind a little bit about that. What you're going to be needing to do, or needing as far as technology, or what all your needs will be for developing those future-ready students. And we talked a little bit last week about how it's really difficult to figure out what the future needs are when you don't even know what the future is going to be. That we're preparing students for jobs that don't even exist for when they're going to be adults and looking for them. And then what your vision is for STEM integration into your schools. Our learning targets for today, we just have 2. By the time we finish today, you're going to know why you're building that STEM culture, why it's important to you and for your students. And you're going to be able to look at the vision that you're creating for your school districts, for your individual schools, for your students. So, it's a big challenge. What do you suppose some of the challenges, barriers, stumbling blocks might be for being able to fully integrate STEM? What would be one you think might be a problem or an issue?
Teacher training.
Teacher training. Just shout them out as you think about them.
Teacher ownership.
Teacher ownership.
Change is hard.
I didn't hear that one.
Change is hard.
Change is difficult? Yes, it is. I know when I was in the classroom, sometimes we were supposed to implement a change and you'd start out really gung-ho and then you get to the end and you think, wait a minute, that's how I've always been doing it. You tend to lapse into what is familiar.
Well, I think that lapse too, going back to what was just said, we almost touched on it last Monday. How do we convince people that this is not simply another fad?
It is.
It's not just another, I've been here 30 years and I've seen the full circle. And this is just part of that circle, if you will. So we're going to wait here till the merry-go-round gets back where I am.
Yeah.
We'll just hang on. So how do we convince them of that?
You know, I think that's an individual thing. There are some that you're going to say, come on, just come with me and I'll show you. Others, they're going to sit back, they're still going to say, I'm not convinced, they're just going to wait. And there may not even be any convincing of that person until they see everybody else is on board. But I think the key is, and somebody said that, the teacher ownership. It used to be, we talked about teacher buy-in. Well, buy-in means that they have to basically accept what's given to them. But teacher ownership, you're going to get the teachers on board to be in part of the creativity and to be part of the actual implementation plan. I don't know when the teacher PD starts. Do we know that, Amy, yet, when the teachers?
We haven't scheduled it yet.
We're
Okay.
talking about middle of the spring for
Yeah.
24, but it's been continuous since we've been here in the system, and a lot of emphasis on it just last week. So that understanding of standards, the understanding of depth of knowledge, the understanding of actively engaging students in the learning process, go back to what we said about STEM previously, it's a culture, it's not
It
a
is.
thing, it's not a building, it's not a lab, it's a culture.
And we actually have a video that comes up that touches on that, so I don't want to say a whole lot yet, but it's going to be getting those people who are showing others that it works and slowly pulling them in. And that video, it's kind of a silly video, but when you watch it, it really does apply and it makes sense.
Getting that buy-in is best, and we've seen this before, Ms. Ash and I have, when it comes to positive peer pressure. We have those satellites, like we're going to have this 24, and they hear the excitement down the hall, and all of a sudden they don't become like that. The buy-in is gradual. This
It
is
is.
not something that's going to, the culture's not going to change in 6 months. It's going to take 3 or 4 years for us to build this, hence the process.
I agree. And you're, like you said, that there are those people who's like, I'm gonna wait till it comes back around and I don't have to do this anymore. I think I told you last week, we had a teacher, his name was Steve, and he used to say, I'm not doing anything until I get the email for the 3rd time because they'll change their mind before I get it. And he really did wait till he got it the 3rd time before he would actually do anything. And those are the kind of people, though, when you finally do get them on board, they're your biggest supporters. And they will come on board when they see, like you said, the excitement and the success in another classroom. Then they'll have to, or they're in the wrong profession. So, we talked about that. Are there any other issues that you think might be
Parents,
parents?
grades.
No, you got me started on
I
that.
know, but you asked, and
That's a 6-hour training right there.
Okay.
Well, and cost.
Cost, absolutely.
Marshmallows and macaroni and that tape that we're given, not so much. But some of the other things that we're looking at are costly.
But, that macaroni and the tape and the marshmallows, I can't even tell you how much money I spent a year at Walmart on things like that for my students to do STEM. Because we had, I think it was like $120 for the entire year for lab supplies. Well, that didn't buy a whole heck of a lot. So I spent probably $400 or $500 on little fiddly things like that. So yes, it does cost money. Somebody's paying for it. So budget, obviously. So here are the ones that, that usually come up. Budget cuts. We are asked more and more with less and less. And standards. Everything has to relate back to the standards. It's not like it was when I started. I handed the book and I got to teach whatever I wanted out of the book. You know, those days are gone. You have to actually make sure that you cover the standards because there are standardized assessments. And then you have those value-added evaluations. Teachers are being evaluated on what their students know. So they have to be able to teach them to the state standards and yet keep them engaged. Attacks on education. Every time I turn on the news, every time I read the paper, there's some other slaughter of teachers somewhere. Just this morning, I got the Orlando Sentinel, and the big controversy in Florida is that teachers are going to be given bonuses in the spring based on their SAT scores that they took before they went to college. Yeah. So what do you think that's done to the morale? You know, because a lot of students, when they're juniors or seniors in high school, really didn't take that seriously. They got into college. Who knew, you know, that 30 years later that was going to come back to haunt them? And I just read not too long ago that Orlando, the Orange County Public Schools, lost an inordinate number of teachers this year that just said, I'm done. So you have all of those challenges too. And when you do get the good teachers, how do you keep them? So there are lots of challenges. And then all basically goes into the bottom one, which was staff morale. And that I'm just going to wait and see.
And we're gonna hear that.
And you will hear
I
that.
don't care if you're at your peak or your apex or whatever, with public relations or whatnot, but when people don't want to change, they're gonna feel bad. So you just need to go ahead and get prepared for that, okay? And I'm not saying we're not a touchy-feely, compassionate group of people, but we gotta do what's best for kids, not what's best for the adults, because most adults don't like change.
No. But kids don't like that much change either. So sometimes you have to show them. And when they start having fun, they start changing their culture as well. I had a student, I think I told you about my Ferris wheel building last week. I had one student, I'd never heard his voice the whole year. He wouldn't talk. And I'd ask him questions. I would try to draw him in, and I'd get a grunt. Or he'd just look at me until I finally went away, because he was not going to do anything. And I got a smile out of him while we're doing the Ferris wheels. And it was like, wow, that was monumental for him, and he actually then did participate. But it took months before I could actually get him engaged. And it worked, yes.
We had a mentor meeting the other day, and we just talked about learning styles and all of these different things. But one of the teachers actually said, you know, well, if all of these things are things that we should be doing, like, why aren't we doing them? You know, the new things. And I said, this is all constructivism. I said, raise your hand in this room if you heard that term in college. And like everybody in that room heard the term in college. I was like, Vygotsky, Piaget, Brunner, all of these are not new concepts. It's the same thing, but it's what Dr. Weiss said when he went to Finland and somebody pulled him to the side and said, I don't understand why you're here. And Dr. Weiss said, you know, we want to know how you're able to do what you're doing. And they said, all the research came from the United States. So we in the United States have this thing of knowing what's best to do. We just don't do it because it's hard and nobody wants to change.
And
And that's what they talked about in mentoring.
Change is uncomfortable sometimes, but if everybody works together to change the culture, we can do it. So I've got another excerpt, and this is the video I was talking to you about. It's actually from a TED Talk, and it talks about how you begin to change the culture, how you get everybody on board when you only have a few. Obviously, you guys are all on board, and you have in mind, I'm sure, some teachers already who, if you go to ask them, they're going to go, okay, I'll do that. But that doesn't create change. It only creates change for those people. We're talking about a change in culture. So this is a short video. I think it's a couple minutes.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out, you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not one nut, it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers, because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is over-glorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
So we're all alone.
Really not sure where I fit in all of this.
This place like that, take my shower.
You would think no.
But don't you know that you've got people in your schools who are that person, the one that you say, you know, I'd really like to do this, and would you do it? And they go, sure. They would do anything you asked them to do. But then you have the majority of the people who are going, I don't know about that. Those are your first followers. And when you get the first followers on board, they start bringing in the second followers, because the first followers do it, and they show them, you know, this is pretty good. It's not that risky. This works. And then you bring on more and more. There were lots of things that came through when I was teaching that I was like, I'm not so sure about that. But you stand up and you'd watch it work and you go, okay, I'll try it. And before long, everybody's doing it and it becomes the culture. So like you said, it's not something that you can do in a week or a month, maybe not even a school year. It may take, 3 or 4 years to get it done, but eventually it will be a culture of the school. So I have another video, and I think this might be the last video if I remember correctly. This one is also from a TED Talk, but Sir Ken Robinson, and I had to look him up, but he's an education person in Great Britain. And he's talking to you about an IBM study. They surveyed 80 businesses around the world and wanted to know what is it that they are looking for. And somebody touched on that earlier, business, you said that. Business is different now than it used to be. So what we have to produce as students and their skill set has to keep up with what business and industry is looking for. So he's going to talk to you about the results of that study. Of course, he does it in a very humorous way. So keep your ears peeled for what he says is the number 2 characteristic they're looking for. He doesn't tell you number 1, but we're going to talk about that afterwards. If something comes to mind, jot it down on one of those sticky notes. and see if you were right.
There was a report published about 18 months ago by IBM
Can you all hear
in
that?
which they reviewed interviews they had with 1,800 leaders of companies in 80 countries, companies and organizations. And they asked them what their priorities are, what keeps them awake at night. And there were two really that came out in reverse order. They are there. The first, they said, in reverse order, was adaptability. How do you run organizations which are able to respond quickly to change? Now, this is a bottom line issue for companies. Because if you don't adapt quickly to changing circumstances, you're very likely to go under. And the history of corporate life around the world is populated with the corpses of once great corporations that didn't move quickly enough. Think, for example, about Kodak. Kodak is now in bankruptcy proceedings. Kodak was synonymous in the 20th century with photography. They invented home photography. They invented digital photography. And now they're out of business. And it's not because people have stopped taking photographs. On the contrary, people are taking more photographs than ever, aren't they? Irritatingly more photographs than ever. I get it all the time. People posting on Facebook, here's my cappuccino. Check this out from a different angle this time. You know. And here it is, after I've drunk half of it. Fascinating. Send me more of these photographs. What happened was that Instagram came along and whipped the ground ready from beneath the feet of companies like Kodak. They just did not adapt. And the reason they didn't adapt is because organizations are not like machines, they're like organisms. They are living entities made up of people with feelings, motivations, roles, aspirations, passions, and ambitions. And if the organism doesn't respond, just as in the natural world, if it doesn't respond to changes in its environment, it dies. And it's what's happened to many companies, including most recently Kodak. So adaptability.
So, adaptability was the first one. Anybody write anything on the sticky note of what you think might have been adaptability was the second one. What you think is number one? And we talked about it a little bit last Monday.
Communication skills?
You would think communication skills, and I would venture to say that that's got to be on the top 5 list, but that's not the number one thing they're looking for.
Innovation.
No, you're getting there. Creativity. I mean, think about it. We talked about how we're looking for students who can be creative and innovative thinkers. We even talked a little bit about that this morning, or this afternoon. And we're looking at businesses who are now looking for people who are creative and innovative. So creativity is at the top of that list, which is also a big part of why we're preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet, because they're looking for those creative souls. So creativity and adaptability. And if you can't adapt and you're not creative, you're not going to be successful. Notice that not once yet have we said they have to have a PhD. Some of the most creative students I had, when I first met them, I thought, oh my God, this kid's not going to amount to much. He'll be lucky if he can stay out of prison before he gets into high school. And then I find out that they were the most amazing artists. It's like, wow. When you tap into that, something changes. And you start to see them from a whole new perspective. It's very different. All right. You ready to get up and up on your feet a little bit, move around? Does everybody have a card? If you don't, raise your hand. There's some extra ones up here. Everybody's got a card? Let's see, I've got 2 up here that have the same. Can I switch your card out? Sorry. Okay. All right, I think that's right. So you should have a card with a number on it and a color on it. Right now I want the numbers. So I've also been told that we can't write on the walls on the sticky paper because it will bleed through. So just grab one of the sheets. There's one over here, one back there, and then 3 along in the back. Once you're finished, then we can put it back up. But what I want you to do is go by number, so all the 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s. Find your partners, grab a piece of chart paper, and bring it back to a table. If it works better to pull 2 tables together, so you have a surface, although I'm not sure how these will work. While you're doing that, I'm going to put the directions up here so that you know what we're going to do. If you need markers, I have a whole bag of markers up here. Please come and get markers.
So far. Camera on the floor,
Y'all drink? What? Maybe later.
What number are you?
3. Am I the only 3? I think I might be the only 3. 3. Y'all want me to get the paper? She's getting it. There it is.
2?
I'm a 3.
You sure?
Sell the 2.
All right, now that you have the proof, somebody who can be really artistic and draw that circle up there, does not have to be perfect, but make it large. We need it anyway. You should have at least 4 people in your group. If you've got 5, then make 5 divisions instead of 4. Around the outside, of that concentric circle, you're going to put your individual definitions. So everybody can use a different color. There's plenty of markers. And then once you all have your definition, in the center, come up with a consensus of what you think STEM is. And I'm going to give you 5 or 10 minutes. We'll see how we progress. We need to make up a little bit of time. So, STEM. Here's a, I guess, real definition of STEM, a professional definition of STEM. You were going to use this? I know. First time I read this, I went, oh my. But read it to yourself. Think about it. Think about what you wrote as your consensus, and then we're going to talk about that.
You notice nobody put this on that list of what things are different now that we have technology, that nobody takes notes anymore. We just take a picture of the phone.
But you know what? That's one of the things that came to mind, especially then when Ken Robinson was talking about we take a lot of pictures. It's like, yeah.
My students hold their phones up to the microscope and take pictures of microscopes.
Yes.
Surprisingly, it works.
Okay, well, why should it not?
I just didn't know what would be. And when I started doing that, I had no problem with photos.
Oh, really? Just letting them?
Yeah. Here's where, get your phone out and do this. It was less of a problem. All right, so transdisciplinary, we talked a little bit about that. We're going to be talking a lot about that over the next several years. Real world, I saw that on some of the posters. Now, if we'd been able to stand there and do all this, I would have you up there actually underlining. But since we can't write on them while they're on the wall, we won't do that. But certainly feel free to go do that during the break or later on. Applying knowledge and context that are making global connections, real world connections. And we even talked about that last week as well, about making those real world connections appropriate. That if they're just thrown in, for it to be thrown in, they really aren't real world connections. Enabling them to develop STEM literacy. STEM literacy is another term that we see bantered around a lot, and some people don't really know what that means. And basically, it's so that our students can speak about STEM, and teachers can speak about STEM and understand it. It's not anything really beyond that. They just know what it is. And then the ability to compete. And that goes with being adaptable, creativity, those things that business and industry are looking for and what they're going to be looking for 10 years from now that maybe they're not looking for today. Questions? So the number one change that we need to make, we need to teach students how to think. There are so many tests that students take, we talked about that last week as well. A lot of tests are rote. They're multiple choice. Now you can make a multiple choice test that really is difficult and they have to think. Those are hard to make. Open-ended questions, projects, problems that have to be solved is training the mind to think. The issue with that is that it's harder to measure. And somebody mentioned grades earlier. What do parents want to see when their kids come home? A grade. But a student who gets an A and always gets an A doesn't necessarily mean that they can be those great problem solvers. They may not be those creative people. I wasn't. I got straight A's. But I can tell you right now that I would have suffered if I hadn't been taught how to think creatively later on. I just did what I was told. I was the good little soldier. You know, I wanted to please, and I got straight A's for it. But I've been to elementary schools nowadays, and I was scared because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I fail first grade now because I don't think that way. I would have to learn, and so we have to teach how to do that. So before students become STEM learners, educators have to be STEM teachers. And your teachers will be going through several days of PD and coaching along the way, so they will have that support built in from people in Discovery Ed. I may be one of them, I don't know yet. We haven't gotten the schedule for that. But there will be people from Discovery Ed who will be the support system for your teachers. So we won't hang them out to dry. We will be there for them when they have questions so that they can become those STEM teachers. They can be those first followers. They can be those teachers who bring in everybody else. So what do you think are the 5 essential elements of STEM? Just shout them out what you think they might be.
Collaboration.
Collaboration. Problem solving.
Transdiscipline.
I think I heard transdisciplinary. Is that what I heard? No, it's not the 5. It's 5 essentials of STEM.
Okay.
Explorative.
Pardon me?
Explorative.
Important to the
No, explorative.
Oh, explorative. Yeah, that could fit into some of these categories. I'm going to pass out a handout. Your teachers are going to get this same handout, and they will spend more than 10 minutes on it. They're actually going to explore this a lot. And it actually has the 5 essentials on there. And what do you see that's leading the pack? Standards. Standards. Because if we don't follow the standards, then what good is anything else that we're doing? Because our students have to pass those state tests. They have to show that they have mastered the content, and the content is the standards. Now remember I told you that discovery is not about the content. We are not dictating to you what you teach. We are showing you ways to teach it. So we're using your standards. When Amy was showing some of the people at the beginning of the session this afternoon, about the streaming, the digital streaming and the textbooks, she pulled up Alabama, not Colorado, or not just a generic. So there are things embedded in there that are specific for your standards. So standards have to drive the instruction. And I'm not even going to pretend to understand that. So we'll just go with this and say it's a real world example. If there are any mathematicians out there, you want to explain it to me later, I'll be more than happy to hear it. But you have to show them why. My daughter is in college right now, she's in nursing school, and she's taking a survey math course that turns out to be all statistics. Because the professor that they hired to teach that class is a statistics professor. And she's so far in above her head, and she calls me crying, and we spent hours on the computer, logged on, looking at these different things. And do you know, I struggle with it too. Last night we were working on figuring the standard deviation of a list of 40 numbers, and it took like 20 minutes to do one problem, and she had 42 of them. You know, and she says to me, when am I ever going to do this? And you know what I told her? I don't know. I don't know if she ever will. I know she's got a class coming up soon that's math for nurses. That will be a real world application for her. And she will do much better because she'll see the relevance of it. She doesn't see the relevance of figuring standard deviation for mileage on cars for Tesla, which was one of her problems last night. So you have to throw in those real world applications, but they have to be appropriate for what you are teaching at the time. STEM careers. We know some of the STEM careers. Engineering, robotics. Those are STEM careers. But what about some of the other careers? There are lots of careers out there that we don't technically consider STEM careers, but they sure do have a STEM component. Technology is a big part of STEM. Figuring out problems is a big part of STEM. And I don't know too many jobs that don't have that. Even to go out and fill an application for a job, you have to be able to maneuver through technology. So it's not just the STEM career that has to be important, it's the STEM in the careers. And I've got a short paper, it's just 2 pages. I'm putting you guys on the end of work today. It is put out by the National Science Foundation, and it talks about STEM in careers. So, you're going to be working on this as well as the other paper periodically up until our break. What I want you to do is read through this. If you need a marker, if you still don't have one, you can come and get one. I want you to read through it, and as you read, you're going to underline a sentence, a phrase, and a word. Everybody have one? A sentence, a phrase, and a word that resonates with you, that to you is particularly important to what you're going to be doing. And we should be able to do that in about 5 minutes. Can we have a couple people share a sentence that resonated with you or that you felt was important to your work? Don't be shy.
Degree is not destiny. So they use an equal sign this way.
What was your sentence? Say it again.
The sentence reads, data stretching decades shows that in the United States, degree is not destiny.
Degree is not destiny.
Loose association between degree and jobs.
Yeah. Used to be that was true, right? If you had a degree, you could get a job?
In that field, yes.
Yes. So a degree, going to college is not a guarantee of a job anymore. Okay, one other sentence?
A STEM educated lawyer or an individual with both a STEM degree and a Master of Business Administration degree can add unique value in a number of work settings.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the latest statistics I've read on that is that the 4% who have those qualifications that have a STEM degree create the jobs for the other 96%. That's astounding.
Engineer that is hired, 10 tech people have to be hired to support that engineer. It's not in there, it's made that up.
But that's probably not.
Sounds like a David Mathis quote.
Sounds good.
I said it all in it.
Okay, so what about a phrase? Somebody want to share a phrase that you said? My guess is a lot of you picked the phrase that was in that sentence.
Pathway choices.
Pathway choices.
Pathway choices.
Pathway choices. There are a lot of different pathways now, aren't there? There are a lot of things that are available now that weren't available when we were students. And one of the things that I always heard in the classroom was, why do I have to know this? And I used to tell my kids, when I didn't know why they would have to know it or what they would ever use it for, the thing is, if you don't know it's available, how do you know you will or won't like it? So you're learning about all those different things. Well, our kids are really learning about things now. There are just so many opportunities and pathways out there. Did you have one?
Yes, on pathways. The pathways themselves are continually being created, so plain and reshaped.
Yes, constantly being changed and reshaped. And they're going to continue to be that. A word. Any word that somebody underlined that was important?
Flexibility.
Flexibility. Fluid. One more? Evolving. We have to be flexible. Teachers have to be flexible. Principals have to be flexible. Students have to be flexible. Things are always changing. And just like with last week's training, with the technology, my clicker, and that's working fine today. And I think it was the setup of the room, but we had to be flexible. I found that I had to stand in a certain spot to get it to work right. Sometimes the network goes down and you're in the middle of something that the students need the internet for. What do? So flexibility in the classroom, they learn that then. That transfers then to flexibility in the workplace later on. So absolutely. So 10 most important work skills. There are lots of skills that students are going to need, and we talk a lot about, and I'm sure you talk a lot about, the 21st century skills that students are going to need. Here were some of the things that are suggested. Longevity. People are living longer. My next door neighbor, who actually came up here with me yesterday, is 74 years old, and she retired 6 months before I did. She taught until she was 73 and a half. Now, when I was in school, teachers who were my age, I thought they had 1 foot in the grave. So people are living longer, they're healthier, and they're staying in the workplace longer. So that changes the dynamics in the workplace. Smart machines and systems, obviously, we have lots of technology. When I first started working at Bristol Myers Squibb, we had a computer, and it filled a room twice this size. It was noisy and it was cold in there, and in order to program anything, it wasn't really programming, in order to get any data out of it, we had these punch cards. We punched these little holes in it, and we put it in this contraption, looked like a waffle iron on its side, and we'd come back the next day and we'd have this sheet of paper that had all of our stuff printed out on us. You guys have more technology in your cell phones than existed in all of that then. So things have definitely changed. And I can't even imagine what it's going to be like for, my grandkids who are coming up, your children. It's going to be very different. Computational world. Everything now has a sensor. When I get on my online banking, I don't type in a passcode, I use my thumbprint. Things are very different. New media, somebody wrote on the Today's Me that we don't go to a video store anymore. We can access movies on our phones. I yelled at a student one time because he was supposed to be silent sustained reading, and he said, I am reading, I'm reading a book. And he had it on his cell phone. And this was before they became as big as they are now. I don't know how he saw it. But things are changing. Super structured organizations now are so vastly different than what they were when we were kids. Global connection. It used to be if you wanted to talk to somebody in another country, it took forever and a day to be able to connect with them. And we could connect to somebody in Germany right now in a split second if we wanted to. So, longevity, smart machines, computation, media, structures of organization, and global connections. And why are they important? To help us make sense. Ken Robinson talked about social networking. They post pictures of everything, from their food to what they're doing. This is my view from my hotel room. Whatever. People post pictures of everything, and we are socially connected to people we haven't seen in 100 years. You know, I got on Facebook for the first time about 7 years ago because I was looking for a cousin. And I, full intention of wiping out that account as soon as I found him. Well, guess what? That didn't happen because by the time I connected with him and we continued our back and forth conversation, I had connected with 40 or 50 more people that I hadn't seen or heard from in a long time. Some of them were relatives. So things have changed. Technology has changed us. We have a completely different mindset now because of all of this. Transdisciplinary, again, we're going to talk more about that in a little while. We have so much available at our fingertips. I made a comment one time in a faculty meeting. We had a new teacher in our department. She was sitting next to me, and they're telling her about all these resources. And I thought about that, and I thought, you know, as a new teacher, if I had been inundated with all those resources, I think I would have packed my bag and gone home. Because even though there's a lot out there to support teachers, there's so much now that it can be overwhelming. So you have to learn how to discriminate and filter, and so do our students. Our students now, they think if they see it on the internet that it must be real. So we have to teach them how to discriminate and filter. So we have STEM indicators. You're going to learn a lot about that through different things with discovery. The 4 C's for this, and we talked last week about that too, that it's creativity, critical thinking, communication, and then the collaboration. And a lot of you wrote some of those words on your STEM posters too, because isn't that also STEM? It's also 21st century. It's also just darn good teaching. Transdisciplinary instruction, we talked about that. There's the definition for it. Beyond all disciplines, but what does that really mean? So here's another way of looking at it. Intradisciplinary, you learn math and that's all you learn, and you don't learn anything about why it's important. But sometimes you have to have multidisciplinary. So we're going to be in a math class, but we're going to bring in some other things. Here's where math is used in science. Here's where math is used in economics. Cross-disciplinary, you're going to maybe team. And a lot of elementary schools team. Do your elementary schools team? Okay, and they plan together so that they can do some of the cross-disciplinary. And that's where a lot of schools are. Also in the interdisciplinary, when we did our silent sustained reading a few years ago, we noticed that a lot of the readings were geared towards literature. So we went to the person who was creating these. Why can't we have some that are science? Why can't we have some that are history? And vary it, but show students that they can read across disciplines and get all that interdisciplinary instruction. Transdisciplinary takes it even further. With transdisciplinary instruction with discovery, we talk about how learning these things cross not only into other disciplines, but also into community and family and real world. So it basically covers everything. And there's just another way of looking at it as well. So with transdisciplinary studies, we don't talk about themes, all thematic units that we talk about in schools a lot. We try to stay away from that. Instead, it is a concept of study. So if we're talking about inventions, we can talk about those inventions in social studies, how that changed history. We can talk about inventions in science, what they did, how they were created. We can talk about it with a STEM focus, because with the inventions, they very often are technology. We can talk about sustainability in multiple disciplines. They can read about it in language arts. So when you talk about these transdisciplinary units, it's a concept that can be overarching in all of those disciplines and also into the real world. Entrepreneurship. You know, when I had my students building their Ferris wheels, one of the things that we could have done if we had had more time is talk about the economic factor. We did bungee jumping Barbie one time, and one of the things that they were supposed to do And believe it or not, that was a lot of fun. They created their bungee jumps, and then they had to figure out the cost of creating that type of a business, and they had to factor in, what about insurance? What about liability? Why do you have to do all this math to figure out, if the Barbie fell so many inches with one rubber band, how far would they fall with two? Why would that be important? And so they found out that if they put too many rubber bands on there, guess what happened to Barbie? She crashed on the floor. Well, we don't want that to happen. So there are lots of things you can bring in that are very much fun, but you can cover every discipline, including, what happens if you want to go out in the real world and you love bungee jumping and you want to start that business? Where would you go? Why would you go there? What would be the cost involved? So the kids really got into that, and I did that with principals one time, and they had a ball. And they were reluctant at first, especially the guys, because they were playing with Barbie dolls. So it can be a lot of fun, but it can be extremely educational. So how does that all come together? So you got that worksheet. This is the same worksheet that you were working on a while ago. If any more ideas came to you while we've been going through that, please jot them down now. And here's the bottom line. We expect things from teachers, we expect things from students, and basically we expect the same things. We want them to be creative. We want them to be thinking globally, outside the box. And what we want for our students, we also need for our teachers. And our teachers are going to get all of that support, and they're going to get it to PD. Okay, I think it's just about everybody's back. So we're going to now focus on students. And you're going to create a student with a partner, so you want more than one person. So if you're working with one person who's got their computer already up and running, you don't have to log on, you don't have to both do it. You do it as a pair. So how does STEM affect students? Well, in order to figure that out, we have to figure out who our students are. So you're going to create a student. We have an example here, and on the page that you're going to in just a few minutes, I've got the criteria, so you don't have to try to remember this. But for our demonstration, we've created Amelia, and the picture of her. And Amelia is 14 years old. She's Hispanic, which that would be very typical down in Florida. And my son, who lives in Indiana, says it's very typical for Indiana now, in southern Indiana. So he majored in Spanish, and he uses his degree all the time in his job. She's ESL. I don't know what term you use. Everywhere I go, somebody uses a different ELL. She's economically disadvantaged, which we find a lot in the minority populations very often, because they're, especially if language is a barrier to them too, they're still building. She's only been in the United States for 6 months and lives with relatives. We have a lot of that in different areas of the country. She's a hard worker and very bright, catches on quickly, but because she doesn't know how to communicate and because she doesn't speak the language, she's limited in what she can do and feels limited. But her teacher knows that she loves to design her own clothes and sew. Is that going to be a STEM career, a possible STEM career? Who knows? So what I want you to do is you're going to go on to Padlet. How many of you worked on Padlet before? You're going to go to Padlet, and I've created the page already, and there's the link. Now, where you see R Brown and then a space, there's actually an underscore there, and there's no way to get rid of that where you can't see it, because I've got it hyperlinked so that I can go right to it. And what you're going to do is describe your student. You're going to think about the transformation in the schools and how that's going to impact your student, what that change is going to do for the student, and what it's going to do for your student's future. Please don't use a real student, and if you do, don't put any last names, making sure it's just a first name. You might want to pick a student that you know, or you might talk about a student who would be representative. that could be all the students in your school. So once everybody's on there, I'll go to Padlet. And when that pops up, you should be able to see the criteria. What I would like for you to do now, your cards that you had earlier, you had numbers and colors. I want you to now group yourself by color. And once you have found everybody, there's probably going to be 4 in each color. There might be a 5th one. Find your color group. You're going to come and get one piece of paper. Should have enough here for everybody to pick one off of here. Take it back to your table because we can't write on the walls. And I'm going to put the questions on your table. Everybody's going to have a different question. So what you're going to do then is after you look at your question, you're going to glean from that article how to answer this question. And then you're just going to share out. So once you have your poster done, put it on the wall and stay with your poster because you're going to teach everybody else what we're going to do. Any questions? All right, find your color group. All right, everybody's done. So our first group has the question, what does teaching look like? So if you just take a minute and talk to the entire group about what teaching looks like.
We broke this down as based on walkthroughs and observations from the different schools that we represent in Phoenix City right now. According to the article and the way that it described it, teaching in Phoenix City now looks mostly like 2.0 with a sprinkling of some 3.0 and then also the sprinkling of some 1.0 in certain areas. I think that may be probably representative of every school that's in here. Where we want to go later, we want 3.0 to be the standard for our teachers and what we see when we walk into a classroom. And using Mr. Suchman's terms right here, we'd like to create the 4.0 beta. We want to step out of that.
All right. Any questions for this group?
Yes, we have some. Email it to me later. Ryan, please.
Okay, the second question was, what are schools preparing students for? And that's over here.
Okay.
Okay, the standard answer, we're supposed to be preparing them to be successful in college or career and/or career. And we gave a bulleted list here. The biggest part of this, for them to be successful, they've got to be able to think on their own. And that involves, creativity, adaptability, collaboration. Sometimes if there's a problem and we want them to solve it, it doesn't have to be just them. They have to be able to find a person, find a resource, find the answer. So self-driven, they got to be able to communicate because sometimes that answer comes from other people. And critical thinking, think outside the box.
Anyone have questions for this group?
Like the self-driven part.
All right, you guys had the question, how do parents view schools?
Oh, wow.
We did it in 3 different categories, of course. 1.0 being a place, and really 1.0 and 2.0 are kind of similar to where it did that in the actual place that parents call school at school. However, in 3.0, it's just schools really not limited to one particular structure per se, but anywhere their learning is taking place at with school.
Anyone have a question for this group? Has that changed over time?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
It has, but we think that parents are still 1.0 with their thinking, and we're trying to get to a 4.0 place.
You're right.
That's problematic.
A lot of it, and it's when we look back to when we were talking about grades, our parents are still thinking that the grade on the report card reflects what the student can do and knows. And that's not always the truth. So, absolutely. So, what does student learning look like?
Students collaborating with each other, activities that are engaging and more hands-on, where they're active, moving around the room, not just stationary at a desk, exploratory, letting them explore different methodologies to come up with solutions, cross-cultural, not just in one area, but looking at a lot of diversity, student-centered, and using the teacher as a facilitator more so than just a director or instructor.
Questions for this group? And our last group in the back, where does learning take place?
Okay. In the 1.0, it's taking place in the classroom as a passive learner, passively in the classroom. 2.0 It's engaged primarily in the classroom, a little bit of venturing out online and other sources. And in a 3.0, it's creatively taking place, collaboratively, anywhere and everywhere.
Any questions for this group? Great job. All of you recognize the fact that where we want to be and where we are may not be exactly, jiving together. And you brought up the fact that the parents are lagging back here. Now, we've got some progressive parents who are right there with us, but the majority probably are still back there because that's where they were. So you have to instill that change not just with the teachers and not just with the students, but also with community and with parents. So good job, give yourselves a hand. Awesome. If you would now, and I'm going to give you a couple minutes to do this, kind of get with your school units, with your groups, because the things we're going to do now will pertain to specific schools. So you're going to work on these together. So if you want to move into that kind of a group instead of however you are sorted now.
Do you want to skip grade levels?
By however would be best for you. We're going to talk about where we are and where we're going and how we're going to get there.